Hey there, fight fans. Jay Petrie here from Sherdog.com. We're here with another episode of Unleashed right now. Our normal host, Ant Walker, he's on Yahoo Answers looking up how is baby formed, how girl get pregnant. So he's unavailable to join us tonight. And with that, we have not one but two special guests. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first, Lev Pisarsky. He's our Sherdog opinion writer and contributor extraordinaire, and I'm really happy to finally have you on the show and sit down with you. So how you doing, Lev?
Very well. Thank you for that very kind introduction, Jay.
I gotta say I thoroughly do enjoy reading your pieces, even if the MMA community has said some words in the past. I enjoy that. It kind of reminds me of the good old days of like the Jake Rawson era, when someone's going to have something to say about what y'all are talking about. So I'm glad to have you here. And as well, we have Matt Wells. I believe tonight you can be Matt the Greater. We'll roll with that. Currently of Body Lock MMA. How you doing, Matt?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Glad to be back on with you guys as always. Break down all the madness, the latest in the world of this crazy ass sport that we follow.
What an absolute madness week. And it will behoove me to introduce our last. He's what does he say? The master of trades, the jack of all trades who's master of them all, I believe. Anyway, he's the lovely and talented Ben Duffy, Sherdog senior editor. What are you doing, Ben? How you doing?
I'm doing really well. As everybody has sort of alluded, it was an extremely packed and extremely wild week of fights. I couldn't think of a better group to dig into them with.
Yeah, I mean, I have to start things off with our stat of the week. It's a very important stat of the week that kind of broached the subject, which UFC 261 was madness. Madness in statistical ways, in performative ways, in medical ways, just it seemed to check all the darn boxes. And so with that, the stat of the week is 14. You should know this one, because Kamaru Usman has a 14-fight win streak in the UFC alone, which, by the way, puts him 2 wins shy of Anderson Silva for the record. Like he passed John Jones, he passed Demetrius Johnson, GSP, Max Holloway, Khabib. So this is rarefied air for Kamaru Usman, and he did so by absolutely posterizing Jorge Masvidal in the rematch. A lot of us, myself included, thought, okay, it's going to be a repeat of the first fight. It's going to be a long plodding decision, takedowns for days, clinch work, heavy, exhausting, oh my God, 25 minutes of attacking the keyboard. It wasn't, and this card delivered. And it delivered, for me, it delivered a far and above a lot of others. But I'm really curious your thoughts. I'll start with you, Lev. Is UFC 261, is this the best event we've seen so far? Is this the kind of fight card that'll stand up for the rest of the year? Is this one was the special one?
Well, it certainly was special, but I like to be an optimist when it comes to MMA, at least. So I'm hoping we get 20 events that are just as good, if not better, this year.
Wow. Man, I mean, I'd love it. I've looked at the forecast. I've seen a couple cards. The Yarzina Rosenstrike goes to Sakai fight night makes me cross my fingers and my eyes and all the rest of the things looking at that. So, hey, man, I like the optimism. I can use it. There's a lot of things to complain about and go crazy about. So, but really, this card, I mean, as for now, it to me, it's the king card. Just the action, the intensity, the excitement, at the end of it, I felt exhausted. Matt Wells, how did you feel at the end of this card? Did you go, oh my God, this is the magic moment? Or what was your big thoughts on 261?
I had the same feeling after, what was that New York card with 3 title fights with
217 with GSP?
Yes,
Yeah.
I felt like that. I was like, man, this is special. This is a special night. Not just for how the fights played out, but the entire circumstances and the craziness of everything unfolding. Having fans back in the arena, the fans made that made those moments they just amplified them. Like, yeah, we missed the crowds, man, but of course, underlying that, it was like, should we even still have fans yet? Like, it was the guy I was toying with this all night. Like, man, the fans are amazing. should they be there though? Like, dang, like I love their reaction. Nobody's wearing a mask when they keep showing the crowd. Like I had that going on my head all night long. So yeah, it was a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts running through my head, but definitely a special evening. It jumped number one for fight card of the year for me on my spreadsheet that I keep. So yeah.
Yeah. Representing the spreadsheets.
Yes.
Ben Duffy, 261. How does it stack up this year? And if you want to go back in history, but this year is fine.
I'm not even going to try to rate it historically. I don't think it's going to age like that. It's the fight card of the year so far. Certainly at the end of the night, I was electrified, and I have an immediate, right after the main event radio recap, that I was stunned beyond my capacity to call up words, which any of you probably know is not a common malady that I suffer often, but I was literally just speechless and stuttering about some of those results. Having said that, a card that also disappointed in some ways. It lost an important fight due to a freakish and chilling injury. It lost an exciting fight that was shaping up to be a great one due to a freakish injury that arguably shouldn't have even merited a stoppage. I mean, count me among those who think Jim Crute should have been able to go out for round 2 on one knee if he wanted. Ooh. He had shot 2 successful double legs without being able to stand. I give the man a chance. So there's room for another card to supplant it before the end of the year. But just in terms of shock value of the wonderful and terrible varieties, unbelievable card. Just the fact that it had 3 different knockouts that will at least make the long list for knockout of the year. I mean, how often can you say that about a card? There was only one fight on the card that was boring, which you can never say that about a 13 fight card these days. So yeah, great card, best card of the year so far. Wouldn't be surprised if it's still at the top at year's end, but there's certainly room for something else to pass it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really excellent point that you raised about that one fight. I'll keep him unnamed, Sherdog colleague said, yeah, this card was great because there was only one fight on it that I hated after it was all over. Which is it's a great thing to think about when I look back in this the event that happened, the fights that transpired, and thinking of all the action, and oh my God, Brendan Allen hit a straight ankle lock that he just said, screw the heel hook, I'm just going to rip your ankle off. Like that doesn't even merit a mention just because of the everything that happened. Like it was UFC 189. Is the last card that we've had in the UFC where all of the main card fights were finishes. It's been a very long time since that happened. And it seemed like it escalated as it went along. The finishes were more dramatic and the action was more intense. And then, you remember 189 to know how intense that was. And and we had the kind of the funny moments with the leg, both of the leg issues. But then Valentina Shevchenko gets in there and says, so you thought you were the strong one? Check this out, and totally had her way with her. Rosie Namajunas punts Weili Zhang in the head. Kamaru Usman punches straight through Jorge Masvidal. Like you always hear, the boxing and the training, the striking coaching, don't punch your opponent, punch through your opponent. And oh my God, for just a second, he had that Kamaru Usman to Francis Ngannou connection where his fist got larger like an Everlong music video, and he just crushed him. But Matt Wells, I want to circle back to something that you said that I feel is important.
God, at least make it ludicrous with like the 2 big giant fists like walking around.
I'm okay with that too.
Don't bring Foo Fighters into this.
I'm fine with that too. but it's something you raised that I think should be further addressed. And Matt, you can take this one because you brought it up. So we're going with a swing or miss on this one. UFC 261 is the first event to have a packed crowd since 2020. Now, the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi had limited fans, and you could kind of feel that pop, but it wasn't like this, where Ariana Carlosi got a standing ovation in a fight card that people wouldn't even know who she was. They were so excited to hear her and Na Liang walk out that they just the roof blew off. So, swing or miss, Matt Wells, the fights are better with fans in the building.
Yes, they are. 100% better, especially considering the time that we haven't had them. There are times when fans get annoying, where they overtake the action. Exactly. When they overtake the action that's taken place, it could be a grapple heavy fight, and the fans, if it's like, you know, in the middle of the card somewhere, although it could be like an exciting grappling fight, they're still gonna hijack the moment by doing the woos, by doing anything else. Like, which fight was that? I believe it was the Woodley versus Maya fight. Woodley versus Maya, where not only were there woos, there was the flashlights going on. They started doing the wave. They started doing anything the fans could. Like, at that point, I was like, okay, I wish this was an empty arena for this fight, because Tyron Woodley stuffing every single Damian Maia takedown is super impressive, and you guys are just hijacking this entire moment. I didn't mind what they were doing here. Like, yeah, we had woos and everything. It was different because we haven't had it in a while. Like, this is what you guys do. Like, all right, I'm not mad at it tonight. This weekend, like, next event, if it's a full crowd or whenever they do the next full crowd thing, like, I will be annoyed at it probably. But, you know, it's just one of those things. I was like, okay, I guess it's nice to be reminded. You know, these fans, they were enjoying themselves. Good for them. If they decided to risk their health, hopefully, I'm going to pretend that everyone was vaccinated in the crowd, because there was not a mask to be seen in sight, unless if they were on the staff or, you know, in a coach's corner or something. So, yeah, fans, I definitely think they definitely made this event better, but it's just hard to picture the moment of Rose getting crowned again without the crowd reaction of that. Same with Valentina, just walking around with her arms stretched out, looking at the crowd, you know, just like soaking it in. Like, all those kind of moments are amplified when it's a packed arena.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting idea that the moments felt special, but I could do it out in a couple weeks. Like, okay, this was good. This is great. It's like almost like one of wheels, like how the UFC has this magical 8K camera, and it's got the gyro stabilized, and it looks like, you know, you're almost in a video game. You guys all saw it on the broadcast, where it was a little too real of a camera, and it was beautiful, and it's high tech stuff, and they only wheel it out every so often. It's almost like they want to put fans in every so often just to make it more interesting. Lev, how you feeling? Do you dig the fact that fans were back in the building? Do you think that no, the Apex had it right? How are you feeling on that one?
Well, for this event, it was absolutely made better by the fans, just because it had been about 14 months since we had last had fans in any appreciable numbers for a UFC event. And say that I prefer when there's no fans, because I remember the first event which didn't have fans during the pandemic era. It was the card in Brazil with Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira. And I remember thinking it was amazing. There weren't any like annoying boos anytime that there was grappling. It also just felt more private. It felt more sincere, the kind of the fights themselves. It didn't have the feel that, oh, this is just a fight for entertainment. This had a feel that this is like a serious fight between two martial artists. So there was a very different feel when it's largely empty, when there's no noise reactions, which I really enjoyed. I also I noticed that a lot of times, even though I'm sure they try not to be, referees, they're influenced by the crowd.
Yes.
They're influenced when the crowd boos two guys on the ground, two girls on the ground, or two fighters clinching, and they'll stand them back up quicker, or they'll separate them quicker. And you could see that there was a lot more time to work with when you have events with no audience. So yeah, it's very nice to have a change of pace and to hear the crowds roar again. But I have to say that personally, I do overall appreciate these empty arena fights, which of course is terrible for the sport, the fans, myself included, right? But just watching them, I do prefer it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't agree completely. I think of the Apex events. I mean, not just the Contender Series that had that feel already, but just the events and hearing the corners and hearing every single strike land and hearing the reaction, the heavy breathing. It sounds so weird when I say that out loud, by the way. When I say, boy, I'm glad to be able to hear the fighters' heavy breathing in the clinch. But no, I get something different out of it. I feel almost like I'm cage side in a way that I miss because, it's the pandemic and whatnot. I like what you said, Lev, that it feels more like martial artists competing for, who's the better fighter than trying to put on a show, the sports entertainment aspect, which that's the struggle we will always have with the sport, is whether it's sporting and competition or it's sports entertainment. And we always have that. I think back to some fighters that would jump, I think at the Brazil event that you mentioned, the Oliveira Lee event, where a fighter one jumped on the cage and was like, there's no one to clap for me. So I think I'll also miss. I think that generally I actually like no fans in the building. If fight nights had no fans and they just stuck them in the Apex, and pay-per-views were fan big drama show, I'm okay with that. Duffy, am I crazy?
No, I don't think so. As the main card, as we ticked over from the prelims to the main card, I was ready to say, you know what, fuck these fans, get them out of here. I was like, why did I miss wooing? Why did I miss people booing the ground game? This being Florida, why did I miss these suspiciously selective USA chants? Can I just put it that way?
Yes, you can.
I mean, if you just can't chant white, you chant
Very
USA,
nicely
but only
done.
for the white ones. But God, what was it that Bill Cosby said back in the day? He said it about people that love cocaine, that they say it intensifies your personality. But what if you're an asshole? I feel as though the fans just sort of put a magnifying glass on everything, because once we got over to the fights that had depth and they had power and stakes behind them already, the fans' reaction in those fights did remind me, oh, right, that's that little extra chill, like those little extra goosebumps I used to get during a great moment. And absolutely, the Namajunas win would not have been the same in an empty arena.
Yeah.
But I do already miss the empty arena aspect. And Lev put it very well in that you feel more like you're watching just a martial arts contest rather than a spectacle. But I'll admit that I enjoyed the kind of voyeuristic moments of stuff that you wouldn't even overhear in press row before. Like the first one I remember was Bryce Mitchell and Charles Rosa, where Charles Rosa, a black belt, is on the ground completely frustrated by this hick who keeps asking about camo shorts, and he's literally trying to taunt Mitchell to let him up and slug it out.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, wow, this is something that if I saw it in a gym, I just be like kind of quietly sit back, and be like, shit. Or obviously the gold standard for this would be Teixeira versus Smith.
Oh yeah.
Where Teixeira is just beating 7 kinds of shit out of Anthony Smith, and you can hear him say, I'm sorry, this is the business. And Smith's like, don't worry, it is what it is. And then a few minutes later, Smith's saying, I'm losing teeth. That's stuff that we never would have had before. And I wonder how many of those moments we will miss this year, just because they're drowned out by people yelling woo.
Yeah, there's that's the moment. Those are the, God, I don't want to say the tender moments, but those are the tender moments in the cage.
Only tender things were Anthony Smith's gums.
I mean, tell you, hey man, his veneers look pretty darn good. I got to say, in the promo, they did them justice. So I'm happy about that. I hope he took them out before fighting Jimmy Crute, although the result was in his favor. There were a few moments that when the fans were in the building, I was happy to hear them. I straight up was the very beginning. I mean, this is a fight that would not have gotten cheers in any normal circumstance. I mentioned it before. Carnelossi Naliang. That's not a fight that traditional MMA fans that we're used to seeing would have been like, boy, I can't wait for this. It turned out to be a barn burner fight. It was spectacular, and I was just internally cheering, as I would anyway. But to hear the crowd give it up for these fighters, I was happy to hear that. But then they gave it up for certain fighters. Like Jorge Masvidal came on, and he had his mashup with DMX and the Scarface theme song, and the crowd went ballistic. And when Kamaru Usman came out, a dominant, respected, great guy champion came out, they booed the whiskers off of him. They booed him to a degree that I thought bad. Like I thought bad of the crowd. Like, what are you doing? you know where he trains normally, right? You know he's not from where you think he is. What's going on here? And then he came out there and knocked Jorge Masvidal's block off in a way that most people didn't predict. And they still booed him in the press conference or in the post-fight interview. There were still boos raining down for that guy, which blows my mind, because to me, that win by itself may not be as spectacular because it's already retreaded territory. He already blanked Jorge Masvidal. I mean, there were the questions, the 6-day notice, the foot stomps and whatever else people want to talk about. So it isn't just that win itself and the fact that it was so dramatic and dynamic, but the stat of the week that I mentioned, he's on a 14-fight win streak. So I'm reluctant to push for it, but I'm curious your thoughts on it as Kamaru Usman, as he stands now, as a pound-for-pound talent, because, there's a lot of people rocketed him up all the way to the top. I know you and I were talking about this, Duffy, so I want to start with you here first. Where does he stand up? Where does Usman stack up right now as a pound-for-pound great of the sport?
Like right now, not all time.
Sure.
Right now,
yeah.
I'm willing to accept the argument that he is the top pound-for-pound fighter in the sport right now, stipulating that, okay, we really do believe that Khabib Nurmagomedov is gone, and John Jones has not fought in over a year and does not have his next fight scheduled. If John Jones comes in and obviously if he becomes a 2-division champ, or even if he just wins a title eliminator against a top 5 heavyweight, if they decide to make him do that first for some crazy reason, I'd be fine pushing him back to the number 1 spot. But for me, it's Kamaru Usman right now. He has been just unbelievably dominant, and despite the fact that he's 32, continues to improve and refine his game. I mean, that jab is now just one of the best weapons in the sport, and he literally did not have that in his arsenal 18 months ago. I am fine with calling him the top pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. If it's not him, it's a woman.
Ooh,
if it's not him, it's either Shevchenko or Nunes.
Man, I mean, it's hard to argue that just based on their own achievements. I mean, Amanda Nunes is on her own ridiculous win streak. She has almost more first-round finishes than any other fighter, male or female, out there. I know we were also talking about this, Lev, as well, about pound-for-pound status, where Kamaru Usman stacks up against Khabib Nurmagomedov or John Jones or Henry Cejudo and so on. So how do you see that play out? I mean, spell it out for me. What do you have for that? How do you see that all play out? Like the top 5 or so?
Well, I think you can certainly rank Usman as number 1. I guess this is somewhat related. I thought it was contrast between how he fought Masvidal the first time versus how he fought him the second time. The first time he fought him, he was the ultimate sportsman. What I mean by that is that he wanted to win and he wanted to minimize his risks of losing. So he was treating the fight as purely a sport. And he fought very intelligently, very professionally, which I always respect those 2 qualities. But in the rematch, I think he knew that he could beat Masvidal any way he wanted to. I think he had the confidence in his striking now. He had beaten a good striker in Gilbert Burns. And so now, instead of being the sportsman, he was the entertainer. He wanted to put on a show for the crowd. He wanted to have a great highlight reel knockout. So he approached the fight very differently. And it's interesting to see how different it is, even though the last fight wasn't that long ago. So I thought that was very interesting to see, and I think he's really phenomenal. You could certainly rank him number 1.
Yeah, it's a tough argument because you can look at it, you the royal you, of course, can look at it like Khabib's still number 1 because he can come back out at any time. Retirements don't mean anything. Fedor retired how many times? Like, I will stand by that till I die. Yeah, that anyone can come back from retirement at any time. because they feel like it. Frank Mir has retired 14 times and has fought 15 times after that. He's now going to bare-knuckle. Anderson Silva had horrible things happen to him along the way, and he's still planning his comeback, which I guess, I don't know, he's fighting the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., but I don't want to get down that rabbit hole because that's a whole thing. But my thought was retirements don't mean much. So it's hard to put Usman above Khabib, just because Khabib hasn't lost, and Usman hasn't lost in the UFC. 18 fight win streak. Khabib's on a 29 fight win streak. The things they've done, you're almost approaching that 1A, 1B territory, just in terms of that. But then you have John Jones, who's on an 18 fight unbeaten streak. Oh, by the way, his only loss is a downward elbow. Well, that's a sketchy rule, but I get it. But he was also, in the process of digging and burying Matt Hamill at the same time. So it was a little bit of a different thing. Hasn't lost a fight. And he's faced basically every champion in the division since like Chuck Liddell or so and beaten them all. And he's also beaten future heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier. And, there's a lot into it. Matt Wells, how do you stack up the pound for pound greats right now? I don't care about all time or the whole GSP argument, because GSP is still here, and sure, he can pass Matt Hughes, but okay, he's still got GSP head. No, just straight up stack up the pound for pound. How do you see Usman fitting into that lineup?
Man, right now for me, he's definitely towards the top of this list. However you want to shake it out. Like I tweeted out during the event, like in the aftermath immediately, I was like, he's the GOAT welterweight for me. And that's, yeah, that's where I'm putting him right now, because I don't have the footage of him being knocked out in a title fight. It does not exist. Oh. Whereas with GSP, got knocked out in a title fight, right? So that alone has him above GSP for me. But there's a slight difference, because you talk about the totality of the career, like that's a different thing. GSP has a better career overall because he has the multi-divisional success. But that literally kind of plays into the whole pound for pound thing, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I said welterweight GOAT. Mm-hmm. But for me, like that list, it's a very short list. Like you said, Khabib, the John Joneses of the world. If we're talking currently, I have him number one currently, because again, like John Jones hasn't been active
since we got together.
Yeah, come back and win a fight, and then you probably jump Kamaru again, because again, multi-divisional success. No other way to argue for the pound for pound argument than to do it in multiple weight classes. So, he's definitely up there. Definitely deserves it. I don't want to entertain these folks out there that are still hardcore against the conversation in GSP. No, that's a conversation you have to have right now. Conversation you must have, and you must entertain the fact that Kamaru is potentially just a better overall fighter than GSP right now too. So these are the type of things that I'm weighing in my mind right now. Continues to add these tools. Yeah, GSP added a jab to his game as well, but GSP was still decisioning guys. Kamaru's not doing that. So there's a lot of differences. But yeah, Kamaru for me is number one currently pound for pound, and we'll see when these other guys return. And Khabib, I think Khabib's done for real, but hey, MMA retirements, we all know how that goes.
Yeah, oh man, I want to have this conversation, but I don't want to derail everything about going down the GSP accomplishment train, because there's going to be the two camps, and both camps are right in a degree. GSP didn't come in and knock someone's block off very often. It just wasn't his game. He had a different style, but at the same time, he also had a record streak of rounds of 33, 35 consecutive rounds that he won. So that's that dominance thing that Usman has had, but has also given up. Like Jorge Masvidal took a round off him. He almost got knocked out by Gilbert Burns. God, maybe we'll have a spin-off show and talk about that. But I feel like we've done the main event justice, and the co-main event deserves some shine too, because Rose Namajunas did the darn thing. 78 seconds. I think that's what it was, 72, 78 seconds. Walk up there and just straight up Billy Jack, I'm going to put this foot up to this side of your face and good douche, and knocked her out cold to the degree that Weili Zhang was actually complaining that the stoppage was bad, as she wasn't sure where she was, which, by the way, Jorge Masvidal also did. Hey, what's going on right now? And did a thing that no one's ever done. No one's finished Weili Zhang in any way. Weili Zhang lost her first fight to Meng Bo, who fights in one championship, and it was a decision. Meng Bo was a lot larger, blah, 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 blah. This was a different kind of statement to me. This was that we talked about Kamaru Usman as sacking it pound for pound. In terms of what Rose Namajunas has done at the strawweight division, beating these champs, smoking these champs, thought nigh unbeatable. I mean, this is the girl that, how big of an underdog was she when she fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk the first time and walked up there and starched her and then handled her in the rematch? She's beaten the champions, and she's got a good style to do it, but she also has some weaknesses that could be exploited. Now, I posited this question to some Sherdog staff members, so I'll start with you because I know you chimed in on it, Lev. Rose Namajunas, I believe you chimed in on it. Anyway, you're about to chime in on it. Rose Namajunas tried to fight for the UFC strawweight title for the very first one against Carla Esparza, fell short, got choked out. Carla Esparza's right there. She's a win away from fighting for the title to try and get her old belt back. Is the strawweight division? Are we gonna go around in circles?
That win
again?
is over Xiaonan Yan, so let's wait to see what happens.
True
but yeah,
that, true that. But are we on the? Is strawweight going to be like the lightweight, like the heavyweight title that it just you don't defend it long?
Well, I can absolutely see them booking a rematch between Rose and Zhang Weili, and
Oh yeah, that too.
if they have a rematch, I think there's a good chance that Zhang Weili will win, despite how impressed I am by Rose and how she fought that fight. Obviously, it was short, but optimally. As for Carla Esparza, I think she's a much better fighter now than when she was champion. She's physically stronger. She's technically a better wrestler. Her striking is better. Her striking defense is a lot better. She improved a lot of elements technically. However, I don't honestly even think she beats Yan Xiaonan. And I don't know that she will have that much to offer Rose nowadays. But there's a lot of really talented fighters in strawweight. It's funny because obviously this is extreme hindsight bias, and I chose Zhang Weili to win as well. But in retrospect, right, you're talking about Zhang Weili, who was knocked down and badly hurt multiple times by Marilia Santos, and she's facing arguably the most powerful and the fastest strike history. So clearly there's like a weakness with her chin that can be exploited at the highest levels. And with that in mind, Amanda Ribas is extremely talented, but has a similar flaw. So yeah, it's very possible that we see a new champion before the year is out. As good as Rose is.
I really do love the way that women's strawweight is fleshing out, because there are challengers that are coming up that haven't fought the top fighters yet for the most part. So it's mostly fresh matchups. Tatiana Suarez, Mackenzie Dern is kind of secretly, kind of quietly armbarring her way through competition to snake her way up there. Yan Xiaonan is a real good talent. I mean, you raise a good point that, you know, it's not a foregone conclusion, you guys, that Esparza is going to win that fight, but there's a lot to work with. So in addition to what I was asking Ben about the strawweight title being the round robin, do you actually think the UFC is going to run back Weili Zhang, Rose Namajunas?
I'm afraid they will. I've been on record here many times as saying that I don't like immediate title rematches ever, 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 unless there was some weird controversy in the first fight. There was no controversy in this. It only does the rematch good if they let Zhang go knock off a couple more people, build up some interest. Let Rose defend her title against someone different. Don't get her into this weird recurring loop where she's like Cain Velasquez and only fights 2 different people for like 3 years straight. Don't do what you did with TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt and just kill a budding rivalry in the bud by having the same person win twice, like 5 months apart. Let it marinate a little bit. But I'm afraid they will. I mean, I said this in the recap radio show, and the comment section went nuts at me. It was like, if it's possible for a good-looking, charismatic, exciting fighter, like female fighter, to win the title and have that be a financial disaster for the UFC, that's what just happened. Like, all you have to do is look at this card to see how desperate the UFC is to get more stars in China. Look at how much Chinese advertising there was on the inside of the octagon. And even knowing that it's probably being exaggerated a little bit by the UFC's hype machine, look at the type of stardom that Zhang is experiencing in China, and just realize, I mean, the UFC built a facility in China that dwarfs the Apex.
A massive facility,
Yes,
by the way.
like
Gargantuan.
they want that market so badly. Like Jay and I, as Fight Finder editors, the flood of results that we're getting from Chinese promotions, just with at this point mostly Chinese and Russian, like CIS prospects, trying to get the eye of UFC or PFL or Bellator, it's just going through the roof. Like it is the future of the sport. Like 5 years from now, the center of talent and commerce is going to have shifted significantly in that direction. The UFC wants Weili Zhang to be a champion. Like, there are millions and millions of viewers that will tune in if she's defending a title that could give a shit less if it's Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal.
Matt Wells, I guess we'll spiral right off from that. How badly does the UFC really want Weili Zhang to be the champion? I know Ben Duffy just answered that, but my question, do they want it badly enough to throw a rematch at this again and force Rose to have to fight the champion twice to win her belt? Which, by the way, this was a question I was very close to asking Dominic Reyes at UFC 247 in Houston, was to ask him, how do you feel approaching this fight with John Jones, knowing you're going to have to beat John Jones twice in a row? Rose Namajunas very possibly could have to beat the champion twice to get the belt again. Is that going to happen, Matt? Are they really going to do this to Rose again?
It wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't, for all the reasons that Ben just said. I don't know if that's the smartest way to go about it, because what would you do with her then if she loses 2 in a row?
Yeah.
I mean, look, Rose has proven, like, hey, you want to put me in a rematch where people thought it was a fluke? Well, I will prove it was not a fluke. So probably not the best course of action right now. I would go something different. I mean, you could, if Joanna wants to step up and fight again, you could run that classic bout back in a main event. Throw that one in China if you want.
Perfect.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but I think an immediate title rematch right now is not the best course. It's not the best course because there was nothing about that fight. I mean, obviously she got starched with a head kick, right? But everything we saw from Rose in that short period of time said that Weili Zhang had no idea how she was gonna figure out that puzzle. Like the movement from Rose was just incredible. The sticking and moving, the lateral movements, the darting in and out. She just looked lost. Like the time that her most effective weapon that she does is blitz forward with combinations, 2-3 punch combinations with a kick. She did that one time and missed with every single thing that she tried to throw in that combination. And then Rose was just like, all right, I'm going to boop. Let's, and it just looked like she was levels above her that night. And I mean, yeah, you could do a rematch and things could go a lot differently. Or it could also look like the rematch between, Usman and Masvidal. It could be the same thing again. So putting her in a situation to where she could very likely lose 2 in a row is just not good for business, in my opinion. Like, yeah, she could get the strap, and then that would be great for business in China, or she could lose 2 in a row, and then what do you do? So I would say pump the brakes on the immediate rematch. Let her go get another win. or maybe just sit out even. You know, if they want to, if they think that high of her to put her in an immediate rematch, they could also have her sit out a fight and see what happens with Rose next.
Considering that Yan Xiaonan might be her next title challenger, that kind of fills the gap there.
Yeah. So,
I mean, tell me if I'm crazy. I would actually rather see Rose versus Andrade 3 next than either Rose versus Yan Jacek 3 or Rose versus Zhang 2.
Of the three rematch?
Of those three options, I'd rather see her fight Andrade a third time next.
I'm not mad at that. I like that.
I mean, there's no justifying it. Like, Andrade has only lost another fight since their second fight. But in terms of my interest in seeing the actual product happen, I like that best out of the three.
I mean, if not, I would love to see Karl Esparza get the win over Yan Xiaonan just for the storyline of going back to the very first title fight. Like, that would be a cool storyline to see how that plays out. I think obviously Rose would starch her, but just to have that storyline coming into a title fight, like, that would be really cool.
But you know what had happened though? You can see it. You can see it right now. Close your eyes and picture. Karl Esparza beats Yan Xiaonan, fights Rose Namajunas, takes her down, chokes her out. And now Karl Esparza is the champion. Who does she fight? Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Joanna Jędrzejczyk gets up there, boxes her face off. Joanna Jędrzejczyk is now the champion. Joanna Jędrzejczyk now defends her title against Jessica Andrade, and she defends it against, Jessica Penne is probably out of the picture, but another. I can see us
Full
having
circle.
absolutely no development other than every single one is better. But there is something else to the Rose Namajunas Weili Zhang fight. And this is something that died immediately. It was talk, it was chatter, it was banter, and then boom. And it was because Weili Zhang at the time was thought to be this destroyer of worlds. Now, granted, this was what her second title defense, so she defended it once. But there was already chatter about Weili Zhang going up to try and fight Valentina Shevchenko. Obviously, that's off the table, and there haven't. Thankfully, I'm going to put this in the world now. There haven't been talk about Rose going up to try and do that too, which obviously that'd be insane. But Valentina Shevchenko destroyed a woman who dropped Rose Namajunas on her head. And MMA math means nothing, but every now and then it kind of makes sense. But she took Jessica Andrade completely out of her game. The one thing that Andrade, I thought going into this upset special, Andrade has the strength. You get in the clinch, we might have a ball game here. Shevchenko went, no, you don't. You don't. You don't have the strength you think you do. Here, let me show you by taking you down 5-7 times without even batting an eye.
With body locks each time, just completely bullying.
The possibility of Andrade to counter this was, I don't want to say John Jonesy in the I'm going to beat you at where you're best at, but it was that aspect of, this is the one place you have been said you're going to beat me. I'm going to do that. So she's in a weird situation. Who on earth should she fight next? Some special fighter, a super fight, or the next top contender? Ben, I'll go with you here.
It's a shame that the UFC has already matched up the two top-ranked women not to fight her yet in Calderwood and Murphy, because I would say let her eat them one at a time. Just Murphy first, because Murphy's older, and then Calderwood. And this time, Calderwood, don't take a stay busy fight, because you lost last time you did that. But certainly the winner of that has done more than enough. I think you're probably heading towards this question next, so I'm just going to get it off my chest right now. When you have a dominant champ, when you have a Kamaru Usman, a John Jones, a Khabib Nurmagomedov, the matchmaker's job is not to try to build a fighter in the lab to knock you off the mountain. The matchmaker's job is to get the most deserving next contender up when you're ready to fight. That's the job. These people, they don't rack up, 7, 9, 11 title defenses, without just getting the next person in line. And if you look at any great champion in the history of this sport, there are some weak spots in their absolute prime, in their absolute title reign. I won't even throw my Fedor question out there, but I'll just say, you look at Anderson Silva's record. Sometimes he just fought the best guy available. It might have been Talis Leches or Patrick Cote. Individually, that might not be, eye-poppingly impressive, but in a continuum of that many defenses in a row, you're like, wow, you fought that long and you never slipped on a banana peel once. You never had an off night, at least not an off night to the extent that anyone was able to take advantage of it. That's an incredible accomplishment taken as a whole. That's what the UFC needs to do. They don't need to find some magic fighter that's gonna beat Shevchenko this time. Just roll them out and say, yeah, she's an 8-1 underdog. What do you want? She's the best we got. And, Shevchenko still has to go out and beat her. Like, crazier things have happened. Ask Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm with you there. I feel like it shouldn't be a question as to who are they going to try and have her beat her next. Now, granted, I will eat this crow. I'm sure I'm going to eat it in a minute or two. But also I'll preemptively eat a little crow by mentioning that I thought that Andrade had the best chance of winning of the field. I think when you lined up field of flyweight contenders, and maybe a couple that'll move up, a couple that'll move down, I thought other than Amanda Nunes, Jessica Andrade was going to be that one. And it wasn't meant to be, and that's great. I mean, fights happen and the results speak for themselves. But I feel like as a money mouse situation, as any other champion that has a long reign, there should be just a regular contender process. Lev, am I out of my mind? Shouldn't the UFC just keep matching fighters up and put them against her? Is there some need for this? I don't know. Beat, like what is it, like get Shorty, kind of get her and beat her and let's finish the job?
No, and a lot of the most popular fighters in UFC history, they had a lot of fights where they were up against very overmatched competition that had very little to offer them. Certainly, you can think of Ronda Rousey. You can think of some of Chuck Liddell's fights back in the day, like when he rematched Jeremy Horn. Jeremy Horn obviously had little to offer, and he was much smaller than Chuck Liddell at that point. So yeah, I don't think there's any problem with her just facing whoever they can find. Not to mention there really doesn't appear to be anyone who can seriously challenge her at flyweight in the near future.
I mean, I felt weird when Jennifer Maia took that round off of her, because I didn't think it was that moment, the even a god can bleed moment, but I felt that moment of, okay, she's not necessarily the most unbeatable force. You just have to fill in the blank and do something. It isn't just some like silver bullet. Ooh, that's good. But it's just, you got to work your way into just contenders. And Matt, I'll leave it with you to wrap this one up and wrap up most of our conversation about 261. Why won't the UFC just move forward with the division and carry on like it would any other division? Why does the UFC keep trying to push super fights, keep trying to push? I mean, I think Dana White said recently, we're probably not going to do the Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko 3 fight, which, by the way, I'm okay with. I don't need to see it anytime soon. Let's work it up. Maybe if they both have something going on, and then 10 fight win streaks, the Anderson Silva GSP thing, okay. But shouldn't the UFC just run the division like a division and have their contender, and the one that's on a couple fight win streak, they get the shot and you move on? Shouldn't that be how it is?
Yeah, I agree. That's how it should be. Listen, I mean, when you have such a dominant champion, like you guys have already said, it should be next man, next woman up. Like, come on, let's go. Valentina is the type of fighter who loves to fight. She'll be active as much as the UFC will put her in there. And she said after the fight here, she said, she plans to fight for a long time. Mm-hmm. Like, she's not going anywhere. I mean, her mom still competes in martial arts, for goodness sakes. So that could be a very, very long title reign, depending how long it lasts. So just keep lining them up and let her knock them down. I mean, I would not be surprised if the UFC said, you know what, Lauren Murphy, go ahead, let's cancel that fight. You're probably going to get waxed, and then we can throw in Calderwood, 2 months later. Because look, the UFC has kind of pigeonholed themselves into the situation where 3 title fight cards, 3 title fight card, 3 title fight card. You need champs to fill out pay-per-views, and they've already established that Shevchenko's not going to be a headliner, just based on history. She's not, unless if it's a fight night card. So she can be your second title fight. UFC 265, Nunes Pena, put her right under that. Or if they want to put her on, be the undercard title fight to McGregor Poirier. Like, there's so many different ways you can move her forward, but it's just got to be keeping her busy at this point. Like you guys said, nobody's going to come out there unless they just have the Matt Serra moment and knock her off, right?
And the UFC seems to crave big time, we called it moments. Like, they're going to put Andrade in there and be like, look, we told you that she could beat Shevchenko. It's a weird practice the UFC is running in certain regards. But yeah, I'm with you guys all that Murphy versus Calderwood doesn't make sense, because you look through the rankings of the top 10, there aren't many women that have won their last fight. So by burning one of the last contenders you have without dropping down to like Alexa Grasso, did she win her last fight? That's the question you have to ask. It was a rhetorical question. You can't, obviously she's not fighting Antonina, so what are you going to do? Macy Barber got, that's not looking good. So there's a situation they have there. But I mentioned this before, so I want to do it and get it out of the way and feel bad for a moment, because everybody likes a pity party. Eating Crow is our segment where we talk about the pick that we totally botched from this past week event. So there was a whole bunch of events that happened, and you want to break down a fight and just no, you're wrong. You're wrong across the board. So in that regard, I actually legitimately thought Jessica Andrade was going to be able to do a thing that few have done before. And I even went so far, and I should have pulled this pick back a little bit, but I went so far as to say Andrade could theoretically get the knockout, probably from her ground game. Well, somebody got the knockout from the ground game, but it wasn't Jessica Andrade, I'll tell you that much. So I am eating a nice 125-pound crow right now, because, man, I tell you, I had the exact result happening, except with the other fighters, and it couldn't have been more stark. Lev, talk me off the ledge. Did you get a pick as bad as I did, or what are you eating crow right now about?
Well, I made in the pick'em, I made a number of mistakes, but actually, I was the only other person aside from you, Jay, who chose Andrade to beat Valentina. Now, that's not to say that if they were plus 100 even money, I would choose Andrade. Obviously, I thought Valentina was the rightful favorite and she would win most of the time. But I completely agreed with you that Andrade, in my opinion, had a very good chance. Defining good maybe as like 30-40% or whatever it was. And see, I actually did expect Valentina to be a better grappler. I think that's actually the real secret behind her success. Everyone always talks about, her striking, her Muay Thai. She is by far the best grappler in the division by a huge margin.
Yeah.
Like when she fought Liz Carmouche, she got the body lock on her, right? And just picked her up. So I would actually say that her grappling is much higher than the second best in the UFC 125 than her striking is. Her striking is actually closer, in my opinion, to the rest of the women than her grappling is. So I did think she would have an edge there, but of course I didn't think it would be anywhere near what it was. I thought it could be like neutralized, where Andrade could like be okay and could turn it into more of a striking match.
Yep.
And I thought that Andrade did have some real chances in the striking, I thought she showed some tremendous improvement over her last fights. Even though she lost to Rose, she had such better defense.
Oh yeah.
She had much better. A lot of her strikes were more technical and crisp. She improved so much in that fight, and then improved again against Caitlin Chukagian. So yeah, I thought she had a real good chance, and no, there was a much bigger disparity in grappling than I expected. And I did think that Jessica Andrade would be able to get up if she was taken down.
Me too.
Which she did for a while, but I didn't expect Valentina to finish in a crucifix like that.
Oh,
was, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And my pick started for Andrade in that she was such a significant 350, 400 underdog that I thought there's value here, because you don't want to sleep on Jessica Andrade, and then that happened. So Lev and I both didn't do great on that particular title fight. Ben, what are you eating crow about in this event here?
Well, several fights I got wrong, but the one I'll highlight is Alex Oliveira versus Randy Brown. I picked Oliveira in this one, even though they were pretty close on the odds, and I actually felt fairly comfortable with it because, well, they're two guys who are good at finding exotic and never before seen ways to lose a fight, but Oliveira's also won a lot of very good fights. So I figured it'd be a sensational fight, but Oliveira just so tough and so just physically strong, even at 170, even against somebody who in Brown is like ridiculously large for the weight class. But Brown looked fantastic. He looked he looked as good in the striking as he probably has in any of his UFC outings to date, which is saying a lot because, he kind of fell out the bottom of that round robin of action fighters with, the Nico Prices and Vicente Luques and Bilal Muhammad's, mostly because he was so much more hittable on the feet than the rest of those guys. They get in the wild brawl and he would just get the worst of it. That's what happens when you go toe to toe with Vicente Luque most of the time. But he looked sharper against Oliveira, and Oliveira is a guy who has all the weapons as a striker, but obviously the finish, to me, my favorite finishes, they're like a haiku. They're over very quickly, but they yield more and more layers of beauty and greatness the more you watch them. Like, obviously, there was that Paul Daly knockout of Sabah Humasi just last week that I probably watched that thing like 25 times. It's just so beautiful. This one here, yeah, the headline, it's a one-arm rear naked choke. When have we ever seen that? But the more you watch it, yeah, he's choking him with one arm, but his other arm is keeping Oliveira's arm away so that he can't properly defend it. Obviously, once you watch it a couple times, you realize that Brown is finishing the choke by grabbing his own lat, which, one, what kind of freak of nature can do that with another human being's neck and head in the middle? But just a brilliant piece of work. He made an exotic and rarely seen finish look like something he had practiced in the gym. I don't know whether he has or not, but that it even looked that way. Very impressive. So my apologies to Randy Brown. I am eating an extremely elongated piece of crow in his honor this week, and go Rude Boy. Well,
Mr. Wells, how's taste my crow?
Man, I really, really thought that Jorge Masvidal was. No, I'm kidding.
No, he learned the foot stomp defense, and now it's all over.
Foot rubbing like Vitor Belfort.
Yeah, right. No, I had two picks wrong on the main card. One I wasn't terribly confident in the first place. I went with Weili Zhang getting it done, but the one that I was more surprised about was Anthony Smith. I had Jimmy Crute winning that fight, and obviously an injury caused the end to that fight, but I was super impressed with how Anthony Smith looked in that first round. He looked like a completely different fighter than what I remember in recent outings from him. Just, again, almost like how Rose was looking, like out there just super sharp on the feet, quick, darting in and out, moving really, really smoothly, really confident in everything that he was doing, contrary to what we've seen from Anthony Smith in recent outings. So That's going to be my crow for that one because I thought Anthony Smith was going to go out there and just get worked, and that the complete opposite happened.
Like this event was like the reminder of the jab, because Smith displayed a jab that I haven't really seen from him in 50 fights. Like, this is a guy who can land a jab and he can kind of keep distance with it, but that's not, he wants to elbow your face off. He doesn't want to keep you at distance. He wants to get up close and knee you in the chest. So yeah, man, I mean, Anthony Smith is still developing skills in a way that I'm also surprised about. But when it comes to surprise, we have our favorite segment, I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. So we had a lot of fight cards happen the past couple days, besides this big UFC, big kibosh that we had. The PFL had its first event in 2021, first one since 2019. LFA had a show that I regret that I wasn't unable to watch it live. KSW had madness happen in Poland before the UFC happened, and of course the UFC as well. So boys, what is your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcon segment? Matt, we'll go with you. We'll start off with what you got for us.
I will just say the event as a whole and how it unfolded and the confusion of how I felt about it playing out. The UFC
260. Okay.
261.
Yeah.
I will say I was super surprised at how much the fans were into the early fights. I expected the fans to be kind of amped up, but man, from the minute they said go to that very first fight, it felt like a title fight for the first few moments of the very first night of the card. I'm like, man, why can't you guys do this all the time? Show up to every fight. You know how many awesome fights you guys missed because you're just like, I don't know these people. They didn't know who the hell was in there fighting in that first fight, but they were there. They were amped up, and it was amazing. It made for an awesome atmosphere. And I wish that was, more so the norm. But obviously we know that's not going to happen again, unless if COVID variant shuts everything down and we have to do this all over again next year.
Now, I will posit that the first fight in the card was so insane, partially because of the pop of the crowd, that these women, I don't know if they had experienced that thunderous applause and raucous, just the noise. It was deafening for a prelim card opener. And they got the royal treatment, and I believe that hyped up those fighters. Ben, what do you have? What are you not surprised, or, what are you not surprised about, Mr. Falcon?
Well, we've been talking a lot recently about the crossover of celebrity spectacle boxing and MMA as, more and more former MMA stars appear over there, after their careers. But I was very surprised to see Jake Paul, the headliner of the Triller Fight Club card that basically counter-programmed the UFC right down to delaying their main event to come up at right the same time, make way too much sense on Twitter. He sent out a lengthy post just targeting UFC President Dana White and pointing out what better paydays these former MMA fighters were getting in boxing, and just kind of underscoring the fact that, the UFC setting the pattern for MMA fighter pay, holds back the whole, it holds back the whole sport, basically. The comments were every bit as insightful as you would expect. The responses, I still don't understand how somebody can claim to love MMA and claim to love the fighters and unabashedly stand for a billionaire who keeps paying them about 15% of gross. But yeah, people were like, you think you're a boxer because you beat up a barista and a washed up. You're not making the point you think you are. Because if Jake Paul is a shitty boxer and making this kind of money, that's even worse. He just made all kinds of sense. And it was just a reminder that in traditional stick and ball sports, the actual competitors make between 50 and 65% of the income. In boxing, it is more than that. It is the fighters rather than the promoters who are really driving the truck. I mean, the promoters have a ton of power. It's where the real matchmaking is done, basically. And manager and management group relationships have made fights happen or have prevented fights from happening for many, many years. But those promoters don't then, keep 3/4 of the money. yeah, it's just Jake Paul, like the blind squirrel finding the acorn, like the broken clock being right twice a day. He said it perfectly. And yeah, I am quite surprised that it was him of all people that was just the voice of common sense and reason.
Who knew? Who knew this guy would? I forget who it was. I think it was it Anton from Bloody Elbow? It was somebody who pointed out like a month or so ago, saying, "What if Jake Paul's the guy who gets the fighters to realize their worth?" So Lev, you got something? What do you got?
Just I know that we've run a good amount of time, but it was pointed out to me by someone recently that almost without exception, the champions in the UFC and the longtime high-level fighters, you can tell that they cannot wait to get out of MMA.
Oh my gosh.
You can tell, like, it is just like emanating off them with everything they say and do. Like, why is that? Well, it's because now they can go and do like shit shows afterwards for actually more money. Like, that might be the thing that actually drives some change, and that would be the most ironic thing ever.
How? Man, our sport is something else, man. When Cain Velasquez gets paid more to work at WrestleMania than he does to fight Brock Lesnar in a different aspect, in a different arena. So, Lev, other than Jake Paul, obviously that's a very surprising situation, and we know your expertise on the subject. What is your "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon" segment about this fight card this weekend? All these fight cards, really.
Well, it was one fight in particular. It just seemed so obvious on paper, and yet the odds were very, very close. And that was Brendan Allen versus Karl Roberson. You look at this fight on paper, and you see, well, Karl Roberson, he has a real weakness to grapplers. He gets taken down. He gets beaten on the ground. And you have Brendan Allen, who is very, very skilled, very opportunistic from the top. And you just look at this fight and you think to yourself, well, shouldn't Brendan Allen be like a huge favorite? And it just seemed almost a little too obvious. Sometimes you have that, and it turns out to be a lot more complicated than you think. But then it played out very similarly to what I expected, and I think what a lot of people expected. So that really stood out to me.
Yeah, man, he did whatever he wanted to. Basically, as soon as he got the first, it was a trip or was it a body lock? It was something that you're like, okay, this fight's over. Yeah, that was a very surprising yet completely unsurprising. I saw this coming a mile away type of fight, which sometimes is fun to have that. So I'm gonna leave the UFC for my segment about "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons," because we've done 261 justice, and I want to talk about something that I am completely surprised about. You can hear my seriousness. You can hear I am so absolutely shocked. I am gobsmacked about this result that happened. So I believe it was last week or the week before where we talked about Eddie Alvarez in one championship, where he fought Yuri Lapicus, and he was disqualified for repeated punches to the back of the head. However we felt about it, if it was an iffy stoppage, if he should have been warned, if he should have gotten the TKO win, after all, whatever we felt about it, the DQ was the DQ, and that's kind of how it stood from referee Justin Brown, I believe. Mm-hmm. A referee that doesn't have a lot of cage time, so this is a relative newcomer compared to a lot of the others that they have, like Olivia Coast and whatnot. Well, one championship said, no, we don't like that. We don't like how that result happened. We're not gonna take it anymore, and they simply overturned it. They as one championship has want to do in the past. There was Giorgio Petrosyan? It was a kickboxing match that happened in one championship where one, after the result happened, said, no, we don't like that result. The other guy won, and it was a very dramatic moment. One championship with its long storied history of not knowing how to interpret its own rules when there are fighters disqualified for suplexes and there are champions that land suplexes and there isn't a word about them. So one clearly has a firm grasp on how to apply the rules in every situation. So one championship unilaterally use an independent, and my air quotes could not be larger. Maybe I need the big ludicrous hands. The could not be larger in that it was an independent panel, partly made up of one staff and personnel. So that's not an independent panel. You are correct, young child.
Yeah,
you are correct.
Lev's kid is laughing his ass off.
Yes, that you can't have an independent panel where you have people on the payroll that have a conflict of interest that obviously want their high-paid free agent to win or at least not lose in this situation and overturn the result. So it's not good. In very simple terms, it's a very problematic result, one that Sherdog is actually going to have to investigate, I believe is the correct terminology, because promoters should not have the power to just say, we don't like what just happened, so we're going to make it the way it should have been. It can't work like that, just in any regard. And it's really unfortunate that a surprising amount of people I respect, MMA media people, officials, other people in other promotions, are like, yes, justice for Eddie. I understand. It was a lousy call, but it was the call made by the person that's in charge, the only person who can make that call. So how else can you do it? How else can you approach the situation besides going, no, I don't like that, I'm going to change it? It's not a kind of system that can function because, yes, you could say they were righting a wrong, but this is the kind of thing where the promotion can decide at any time, we don't like that this person beat our champion, so we're going to change the result because we can. And it's not going to happen. I mean, I'll say it very clearly. One championship. Y'all got some explaining to do. So go ahead, Duffy.
I don't understand why this is still a problem. They've been around for almost 10 years at this point. Or is it a full 10? I feel like they started in like 2011.
Yeah, I think it's about 10.
And the whole time it's been, we are running our shows in these unregulated countries. Yep. It's been a decade. Yep. You are based out of a country where they will beat the shit out of you with a cane for spitting gum on the sidewalk. You can get regulated in Singapore. It's possible.
Oh, yes.
I just think it is complete bullshit that they keep hiding behind this. And meanwhile, taking advantage of the situation to finesse results, that fit their narrative. Like there is a sister sport to MMA that I don't watch that does that, and I'm happy to ignore professional wrestling, but I have to report on one championship.
Yeah, it kind of feels like, the Monday Night Raw fight where somebody comes in and interferes with the match and then the match ends and then the Raw GM comes out and he's like, you know what, restart the damn match.
By God, that's Chachu Sichitong's music.
We're so close to that. It's not even funny.
And it's really, really unfortunate for a business that claims to what do they always say? Honor, integrity, and then they make it's what is it? The old whose line is it anyway? Where everything's made up and the points don't matter. It shouldn't be this kind of situation because the UFC serves as its own commission in certain jurisdictions around the world. Macau is a very oftenly cited one. When they go to Macau, because it's a special administrative region in China, the UFC acts as its own commission instead of adhering to this or that federation. Now, Dana White had an issue once upon a time where he kicked out a judge for bad calls. They were bad calls. I disagreed with the scorecards, but in no way should the promoter have the say on those kinds of regulatory issues. The UFC, the one championship, anybody else, it can't work like that. You can't say you have an independent third party that consists of company members. So I'm going to stop ranting about this subject and decide instead to exert my authority on you mofos, as Ant Walker would like to say, because it is now time for the speed bag. Now I have here, I don't have the ba-ding sound. I should have gotten the ba-ding sound. A timer here. Everybody will have 10 seconds to answer this question, and we'll go through each one by one. So, the first question, I'll start with our guest, Lev. Chris Weidman. So, Chris Weidman had the shocking injury, broke his leg. 36 years young. Will Chris Weidman fight in the UFC after suffering his broken leg against Uriah Hall? And go.
Yes, he will, but because he doesn't want his last memory as a fighter to be such a shocking and sad injury.
Ding. Ooh, good timing. All right, Mr. Duffy, 10 seconds. Chris Weidman, UFC, yes or no? Go.
I will go one better. I think he fights at least twice more, and wouldn't be
wow.
surprised if we're more than that. He's not done.
Ding. Close enough. Matt Wells, Chris Weidman, UFC, bust, yes or no? Go.
No, I'm going to say he's done. This is a guy who's been really down on himself in years past, and I think this is the type of injury to say, you know what, I'm going to walk away now.
And ding, nicely done, gentlemen. All right, now the next question. So we asked about your surprising moments, and we just talked about one that was very surprising. But what was your most, and this is a very dramatic UFC 261 card. So what was the most shocking moment of UFC 261? And Ben Duffy, we'll start with you. Ding.
It's the leg break, and there's not even a close second. It's one of the most shocking things I've seen in MMA, period.
All right, I'll go with that. Matt Wells, what's the most shocking moment of 261 for you?
That the crowd gave so much clout to Jake Paul. Since I'm just going with a different answer here, obviously, but they gave Jake Paul attention the entire evening.
Ding. They did. There were chants and everything. Lev, shocking moments at UFC 261. What do you got? Ding.
Just how very short the Rose Zhang Weili fight was, because I think everyone expected a 25-minute war of attrition, or certainly a long one.
Not bad at all. I like how we all had different answers. I was kind of hoping that it wouldn't just be, what he said. So third and final question. Jorge Masvidal is in the news for other reasons than fighting right before his event by announcing he is starting a bare-knuckle MMA promotion in Florida. Bare-knuckle MMA rules. So we'll start with you, Ben. Is bare-knuckle MMA the future of the sport? Ding.
No, I don't think you'll ever get like decent MMA fighters in this era, like signing up to fight bare knuckle MMA rules. Nope, not the future.
Ding. Matt Wells, bare knuckle MMA. How do you see it? How does it spell out for you? Ba-ding.
Future of the sport, no, but it is safer than our version of MMA that we always tune into week in and week out. But yeah, won't be the future.
Ding. And Lev, take us home here. Bare knuckle MMA. Future of the sport, yay or nay? How you feeling? Ding.
Not unless they can adopt the same rule set of the SEG early UFC era. Only then.
Ding, 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 ding. Boys, you guys, I didn't have any moments to go, oh, I'm ashamed of you, and put my hand on my hip and go, how could you? So I'm going to give myself 30 seconds to pound through all three of these questions, and I hope I go over so you can call me on it, because I have the timer and you'll totally know when I'm going over. So I'll start at the first question. Will Chris Weidman fight in the UFC after suffering a broken leg against Uriah Hall? And ding. No, he won't. I think this is the end of the road for Chris Weidman. I respect what he's done in his career, but I think 36, 37 and a bad injury, I think that's it. Shocking moments go, I have to go with Rose Namajunas kicking Weili Zhang in the head. I jumped out of my seat, and I'm supposed to be typing at the time. And when it comes to Jorge Masvidal and BKMMA, I think there's a place for it in the sport. Future, no, but I think it's going to catch on like BK does, and we're going to hate ourselves for it. Ding, 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 ding. Well done, everybody. I suppose we should wrap this baby up with some prognostications about a couple upcoming events that we have. So PFL, we didn't really talk about this card and the first one that happened, which admittedly didn't go very well. For if you're a PFL executive, some champions lost, a lot of wild betting upsets, a lot of nonsense and unexpected situations, and not a ton of action. So PFL is coming back with a 9-fight card this week with welterweights and light heavyweights. Now, the news is that Magomed Karamov, the presumptive favorite of all the tournament, the one who was going to run the show until he got injured last year, is out this year. So now Rory MacDonald, Rory Coopers, those guys are going to be free to proceed unmagomed Karamov, for better or for worse. So PFL pushes very hard, and we've noticed this since they've acquired a certain PR representative, that PFL is the number 2 MMA organization in the world. So, Lev, I know you have some thoughts on this as the PFL, how it stands in the MMA community. So, do you buy into it? And what are your general thoughts on this season of PFL as a whole?
Well, no, I don't buy into it. There was I mentioned there was a very good article by John S. Nash, not to be confused with the legendary Nobel Prize winning economist John F. Nash for A Beautiful Mind. But John S. Nash, he wrote a very good article where he noted that the PFL only has like 300 tickets that they actually get money for. The other 2,700, 3,000 are comped. I don't see how they make any money or if that's even their purpose necessarily. So there seems to be a lot of, and he also wrote about all the contracts that Ali's fighters have with PFL and how they have a real in with them. So there's certain fighters that they allow in and other fighters that they don't. I think the way they structure their tournaments is awful. I think the fact that they have a lot of grapplers in their tournaments, but at the same time they don't allow elbows to a downed opponent is horrible. I think you either have to go the pride route and allow knees to the head of a downed opponent, or else allow elbows to a downed opponent. Otherwise, it just isn't nearly as entertaining. So, yeah, I disagree very strongly with that assessment.
Now, I don't know if you've seen. Did you watch PFL 1, Matt? Did you get to take in some of the spectacled Anthony Pettis fell short to Clay Collard in a fairly surprising beatdown until Anthony Pettis kicked him in the head, and then it was still, it ended. I mean, what's your big overall take on PFL so far this season?
So far, I mean, I enjoyed the first event, but yeah, things like the absence of elbows is so apparent in that format. Mm-hmm. Although I love the overall format. That's just one thing I would change, right there, right off the bat. Like, I don't know if we would go knees to down opponents if I was in charge there, but definitely elbows, man. It's like that's one of the big things when you make the jump from amateur ranks to pro ranks. You get the addition of elbows. So then when we have the true fighters league, you take the elbows back out. It just doesn't make sense to me. But other than that, I enjoy everything about PFL besides that.
Yeah. I mean, was that it, Matt?
Yeah, that's it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I understand the reason for the elbow rule because they cause cuts and they don't want their tournaments to fall apart, because their first 2 rounds take place in one night. They don't want that all to fall apart because somebody wins but got cut. But there's no reason they need to pursue that during the regular season. I do love the structure. I was the hugest fan of it the first season just because that extra incentive for finishes, for early finishes. We got a bunch of wild shit. We got stuff that I had not felt that way since the first season of Bellator. Like, ironically, the season where, Jorge Masvidal became the victim of their first big Bellator moment highlight. Yep. That feeling that just any crazy thing could happen in this, 2-hour span of time that I'm watching these fights. That's gone away. And the problems with their season format have been laid bare. Because even when you're running just a regular old MMA promotion, weight misses and injuries and illness kill so many of your fights. But when those fights are also determining what happens at the card like 6 weeks from now, you're just setting up dominoes in basically a windstorm. As much as I love it, I think it's a model that's doomed to failure. Like, their playoffs are always going to have people sneaking in without even having fought in the regular season, or people that we saw get beat badly in the regular season.
Yep.
And then once the playoffs start, it just all goes to hell because that 2-round thing, the fighter who thinks or knows he's winning is just heavily incentivized to do shit.
Well,
it's a shame. 'Cause-
here's something. I'm cutting you off for a reason, because they have gotten rid of the one night tournament aspect of PFL this season.
see.
There are now 4 playoff contenders, and they fight in the semifinals, which is just another event, and then the finals are so they have changed that, but I still believe elbows are off the table.
Right, but I did know that they cut it to 4 and just done the 2 rounds separately. That's a big step in the right direction, honestly. Like those first round playoff things, those were just nightmare nights of fights.
The draw, first round advancings.
Yeah, just I'm remembering Sadabusi backstage trying to rub a cramp out of his leg because even though he lost, he's gonna have to go back out and fight. And just I was like, this sucks. But
didn't Chris Curtis retire and then grab a donut and then get called back in to fight later on that night and said, no, oh crap, now I have to fight again as an injury replacement. I'm pretty sure Action Man retired mid event only to come back, fight, and lose again. Yeah, I mean, putting aside the fact that PFL's marketing and PR is very reminiscent of another organization that promises billions of views, it's just why? This is more of a rhetorical question than actually asking you guys. Why does an organization need to say they're number 2? What is to be gained by saying you're above everybody besides the preeminent organization? It doesn't really resonate to me, especially, and I don't know if any of you saw the graphic that PFL put out to analyze the promotions that are all the things they have and pay-per-views and this is and that, and this is why we're number 2. It's like, I think that it was back in New England. There was a porta potty business. I think they were actually called the Blow Brothers. I'm not making this up. And their sign on the side of the truck said, we're number 1 in the number 2 business. Okay, right on. But I get that vibe. I get we're number 2. We're number 2. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it doesn't. So you're better than so you think you're better than Bellator. 1 championship. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. I'll ask a quick question though before I devolve into madness. Rory MacDonald now apparently, of all the fighters, he's now fighting Curtis Millender because of injury. David Michaud had a heart issue, and I hope he recovers at least enough to be all right just normally, let alone fight. So he's fighting short notice replacement. Does Rory MacDonald, is he your guy at welterweight? Quick, we'll go quick through you. Matt, what do you think? Rory at welterweight. Is he the guy?
Yeah, he's the guy for me. I just had to see it happen. I got to see him lose the spot, man. He's the guy for me. And that was my choice when I saw the roster at the beginning of the, however many months ago it was when they announced the roster.
Now, Lev, do you also agree that Rory MacDonald's the guy? Is Ray Cooper your guy? What are you seeing of the welterweight division here?
I don't think it's necessarily a obvious path for Rory MacDonald at all. I can absolutely see Ray Cooper defeating him. Obviously, Ray Cooper, I think it was maybe 2 years at this point, he had that huge win as a plus 900 underdog.
Jake Shield.
Yeah, there we
Shields,
go.
Yeah. Because of the father-son thing.
Yeah. But he's a good wrestler. He can nullify grappling, and Rory MacDonald is a very good wrestler, but he's not a great one. And I can absolutely see him having success with his striking. I think there's some other solid welterweights who could have very close fights with Rory MacDonald if Rory MacDonald's fight against John Fitch was anything to go by. So, yeah, I don't necessarily think he will win.
So, Ben, before we go to our last topic, Rory MacDonald, is he the king of PFL's light or welterweight division now?
I certainly don't favor him against
the uncrowned king. The uncrowned king.
Yeah, I certainly don't favor him against the field to win the thing. I think it's fairly wide open, as Lev suggested. I do favor him slightly against Cooper, but considering his apparent motivation level in his last few fights and the fact that he's just sort of generally slowing as a guy who was fighting professionally at like age 17 and has been in some wars. I mean, he was the other half of those fights against Robbie Lawler that we credit with taking 5 years off Lawler's life, and he's the one that lost the fights. But yeah, I do favor him slightly to kind of jab, leg kick, and wrestle his way to a win over Cooper, but it's not a foregone conclusion. He is the guy I would have given the best chance of beating Magomed Karamov, but I would have favored Mags over the field if he were still around.
Yeah, I mean that's such a transformation now that I think it's Gleison Tebow is now a guy at welterweight. So that's we're veering off. I think it's Gleison Tebow and Joao Zeferino are now meeting at welterweight to kind of make up the ground. Yeah, I'm also with you guys. I think that 5 years ago, 100% Rory would steamroll. Maybe a little more than 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Rory would be my foregone conclusion. It's just a formality. But I would have said the same thing about Anthony Pettis. And he got shellacked out there by Clay Collard, who fought 15 times as a boxer after leaving MMA. By the way, he fought 15 times as a boxer in the span of retiring from MMA in 2019 to coming back in 2020. He fought 15 times. Holy smokes. And he did some good stuff. But we're going to end it off here as we've gone long because 261 deserved all the love and madness we gave to it. The UFC is coming back with an ESPN card that isn't half bad. Like, there's often the time that we have the blockbuster and then a nosedive and we go, oh, what are you doing here? But there's still an obvious hangover feel, a kind of a oh my God, what are we doing? We just had this crazy card. Give us a minute. In Dominic Reyes and Yuri Prochazka headlining this card, I think there's 12 fights on it now. So I guess I'll ask you that question first. And Lev, I'll start with you here. Should the UFC take a week after those kinds of like a triple title fight one of those super cards? Should the UFC build a buffer for itself when they run those events just to let everything settle?
Well, I think in general they have way too many events, which I understand there's way more talent now than there was 15, 20 years ago, vastly more talent. But at the same time, you just burn out your audience when it's just nonstop card after card. Almost no one, unless they write about it or follow it or gamble on it. If none of those are the case, pretty much no one actually follows these cards and these fights week to week in a very detailed manner. So yeah, I think they should absolutely take a week off, maybe 2 weeks off, and they should maybe have more of those weeks off throughout the year. I think 41 events might be just too much for the audience at times, and maybe something like 25 for 30, maybe even a bit less than that might make more sense. And it would make for much, much stronger cards. I've written an article about how very weak some of these cards are now.
They really, I mean, I really don't want to bash on this card, but the Rosenstrike Sakai card that's coming up in I think June is just on paper tough. Yes, you're correct. That is exactly right there, little one. It's just hard to wrap my head around it. I feel like that too as well after an event like that. Now, 261 happened and it just was exhausting. Do you feel, Matt Wells, that it would behoove the UFC to kind of let it linger a little bit, like let the cloud in the air, because we're right back into media day and Dominic Reyes and Yuri Prochazka, the next thing. Shouldn't the UFC let this kind of moment simmer before just going, well, it's on with the show?
This is like they've become the WWE in this aspect, right? Because it's like the Raw after WrestleMania. WrestleMania this year, for all the pro wrestling fans out there, it had some incredible moments, right? And then you fast forward to the Raw after Mania, which is usually really, really good, but it just absolutely sucked this year. And I think this is going to be the same case with the quote-unquote fight after Mania here, the UFC version, being a lot less in terms of pretty much everything. You don't have the star power. You don't have the fans, which is literally the same thing that happened in WWE this year too. So it's one of those things, man, where it's like, yeah, I would love if they gave us a week after these sorts of event, like the big triple title fight events, let everything simmer down. But they just got to pump out these events, man. They got to keep getting paid. I mean, business wise for them on the back end, it makes more sense to do it. But yeah, like everything about this says, man, why is it so quick? You're back to the apex. It's just gonna feel so much more like a downer, like the whole evening, because you're not gonna have that energy that we just saw. That energy that got everybody amped up from the very first fight of the night. It's gonna be flat. So it's the only plus is that we're back to the small cage, I guess.
That is a good point. I know we talked. I think it was Rogan and Anik talked about. Oh yeah, that's right. We have the bigger cage now. Let's see what happens. Duffy, am I becoming a little cranky as I continue to cover the sport? Am I feeling the fatigue a little too much in the event? We got to go on to the next one like there ain't no getting off of this train we on kind of feel. Would it be better if the UFC took a minute to take a deep breath after a card like that, to let the fans enjoy the moment, let the fighters, let the UFC enjoy the success of the moment?
Sure. I mean, we've reached. I come from an era where the UFC put on 8 cards a year, so obviously we're never going back to that. But you had 3 months to look forward to the next pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, you name me a random UFC from that era, like you name me UFC 48 or something. If I had a piece of paper, I could probably write out the whole card because I remember every fight distinctly. I remember, if somebody was going to debut in the UFC at the next pay-per-view, I had 2 months to go back and watch all their fights in Pancrase or King of the Cage or whatever. It's a conveyor belt now, and it's a very fast-moving one. And part of me feels like maybe I'm just being selfish and jaded because, hey, if the UFC doesn't put on a card the weekend after a pay-per-view, that's a weekend that I can do other things, either with my own life or other things for Sherdog. But no, because even before I worked in this industry professionally, it had been a couple of years since I reached my breaking point and simply didn't watch every card anymore. I think like it was probably 2012 or 2013 was the last year that I made it a point to watch every single event. After that, it just got to be too much. I had other shit to do, like I only have one hobby as it is, and so yeah, it would be great. They're never going to go back to 25 or 30 cards a year, I don't think. But just something as simple as always taking a week off after a pay-per-view. What would that cut it? That would cut it by about 10 events a year. And it would give those pay-per-views more weight. We'd have more time for the media to discuss it, for fans to discuss it, for fighters to discuss it, and for the speculation to swirl over like what the next matchups were. It would give time for people like Zhang, that had really raw reactions in the moment to sort of gather their thoughts, and clarify their positions while the sport was still listening. I think it would be win-win-win for everybody except the UFC that has to produce like 42 events a year for ESPN.
Yeah, you almost want the UFC to run multiple events in a day, so then you can just get that out of the way and have that buffer.
Like some promotion from Tajikistan that has things going on 3 mats at the same time, man, like a high school wrestling tournament.
Well, they did have the international cards where they'd have the one in the day and they had Joe Martinez and Bruce Buffer and bounce back and forth. But you get 6 hours to breathe. I would almost prefer that to a never-ending. 261 was insane. The 4 of us talked for an hour about it and could have easily spent another 3 and had not just droned on boringly for a while. But we have to now break away from that conversation to talk about the next thing. You finish this candy bar and you're already unwrapping the next one. And so I guess the last question I'll ask, we don't have the fatigue. We don't have the exhaustion of it. We have 12 fights on the card of ranging value and excitement. So give me, Matt Wells, you can start with this one. Give me one fight that you go, okay, I like that fight.
Outside of the main event, I'll go with Merab versus Cody Stamann. That's going to be a hell of a fight. It's going to be a hell of a fight. However long that one lasts, it could very well just be a 15-minute, just like back and forth battle with Merab just trying to constantly get takedowns. But I think that's the most interesting fight for me outside of the main event.
Yeah, I mean that's a card that's a fight that I think they've been trying to make for a while. So and COVID and the other issues are back. So I think I'm glad they kept that fight together. So Ben, another fight that you look at and go, okay, I can sink my teeth into this one now. What do you have?
Oh, give me Sean Strickland versus Krzysztof Jotko. We have 2019's low-key comeback story in the UFC versus 2020's low-key comeback story in the UFC. Jotko is someone that I had written off just as, oh, he's done. He's lost 3 straight in the UFC. I get this guy. He's a guy that, came up in, like mainland Europe promotions, just hit his ceiling in the UFC. He's gone. Then next thing I knew, he'd won 3 more in a row. Strickland, I forgot the dude existed. I'm just saying, he came back and you look at him, I'm like, is he British? It's like, no, he's from Florida, but he just looks like, the love child of, Michael Bisping and, Paul Kelly or something. But he came back out of nowhere, severe injury, 2 years gone. And whoops, Jack Marshman, who, okay, no great shakes, but Brendan Allen, who, Sherdog, we just stuck him into our middleweight top 15. And Strickland handled him. So all of a sudden, these two guys are a story again. It should be a really good fight and a continuing success story for whoever wins.
I dig it, man. I like it a lot. I mean, Strickland, yeah, he surprised us. But he had the motorcycle injury or so that kept him on. Wasn't it motorcycle?
I think it was motorcycle.
I think it was that. Yeah, and then he's back and on the scene again. So I'm gonna go and take this and step over because I don't think it's one that Lev will have. And if it does, my bad buddy. I am actually genuinely interested to see how Randa Marcos versus Luana Pinheiro plays out, because this is that kind of fight at the end of the, Randa Marcos is a 500 record, always been kind of a sink or swim, feast or famine. I can hit you with an arm bar. You can hit me with an arm bar. We'll see what happens. And she's going against Pinheiro, and I'm sure I'm butchering that name, Pinheiro? Anyway, she's going against a promising prospect from the last season of Contender Series, who's finally able to make her way on. And she's a straight finisher. She likes to submit people a lot. So I am looking forward to see the grappling. If it's that welcome to the UFC, little lady kind of thing, where she realizes that Randa Marcos is a better grappler, or is it the other way around and you go, okay, this girl has a future. Either way, I think there's something I can learn from this fight. And I look at a lot of the other fights in this card. I don't see that. I think there's some takeaway. So Lev, buddy, I really appreciate you coming on, and I want you to take us home. What is the fight that you look at and go, that's the one?
Well, I'm just going to be very, very boring and say it's a main event. I think it's a dynamite main event. It's a fantastic main event, followed by a card that's, in general, quite weak and forgettable by UFC standards, even compared to a few years ago. But the main event is fantastic. I'm a big fan of both Reyes and Prochazka. And I think Reyes, actually, if he gets another crack at the champion, he can absolutely defeat him. I think he was maybe a little hungover from the high of a John Jones fight. He didn't really look as focused. Maybe he wasn't as prepared. But I absolutely think that he could defeat Blachowicz, and of course Prochazka. Yeah, he can. He's a dynamite fighter. I think he could be a very big star in the sport, and has a very good chance of becoming light heavyweight champion, possibly very soon. So that's an incredible main event.
It is a really, really good main event. I'm really looking forward to this. So bonus second question. Show of hands. That's all I want. Show of hands. Does Dominic Reyes win this fight? Raise your hand. Okay. So that means Yuri Prochazka. Does Yuri Prochazka win the fight? Raise your hand. Okay, it's 3.5 to 1, so 3.5 to 1/2. Who knows? Anyway, the panel now unofficially and very scientifically believes that Yuri Prochazka is going to win this fight. Check back next week for all of us to be wrong, because we all picked everybody anyway. All right, that'll do it with this long, overstuffed, and beautiful edition of Unleashed. Lev, thank you very, very much for coming on the show. I'm really happy to have you this time. I hope you can come back sometime if you want. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, and Matt Wells, man, you saved the day. What can I say? Thank you,
You're
buddy.
here for it, buddy. I'm here for it.
And as always, Ben Duffy, you and me, buddy. Rock and roll. All right. That'll do it for us. We will see you next week. Ant Walker may be in the chair. If not, he's on Yahoo Answers. Don't worry about him. And we will see you next week.